Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for coming. This week, of course, we have a double Parsha, as we often do, Matos, Maasei. When they are together, it is the longest Torah reading of the whole year. And as you would expect, there are many different things to talk about. It's very hard to choose. We have on one hand the whole Parsha of vows, which is a fascinating sugya, for which there's a whole Maseches. Actually, there are two tractates, Maseches Nedarim and Maseches Shavuos, which is not about the holiday Shavuos, but it's about taking an oath. And I will just say very briefly that one of the very important lessons that we learn from the Parsha of Nedarim is that words make a difference. Your words create existential, spiritual realities. If I take an oath not to eat an apple, or if I take a neder, the apple is forbidden to me, that's formulated in different ways, it becomes the same as chazer, meaning I literally have the power to create prohibitions. That's a godlike power. Normally only God determines what is mutter, what is usher. The koach of Nedarim says I can do so as well, meaning God says I'm not allowed to violate my vow. That itself is extremely important because that refers to the koach of dibor. We think sticks and stones. Oh, I'm sorry. Sticks and stones may break my bones. Names will never hurt me. Well, we see from the Parsha of Nedarim that words are realities. I'm sorry I hasten to begin too quickly. I need to announce the dedication. The shir is dedicated, Refuah Shlema, to Menachem Mendel ben Nechama Dina, Notah ben Zeisel and Baruch ben Frida, and for the liberation of Eretz Yisrael from its enemies, safe return home of the hostages and soldiers, the unity of Am Yisrael, and a refuah for all those whose health has been affected by the war, as well as our tefillos for the release of Arvin Netanel ben Sonia, the young man in Iran, and an Aliyat Neshamot for Yitzchak Hirsh ben Eliezer, Chaim Yaakov Ben Moshe, who was a loving and dedicated husband, father, grandfather, community member by Yael Roberts-Danesh, and for Jeremy Bernstein's late mother's Yahrzeit, the 26th of Tamuz Sara bas Eliezer HaLevi. May all of the Neshamos have an Aliyah in the merit of Achzakas Torah. We also have some other dedications, but the Yahrzeit will be next week, so we will announce them then. So if your Yahrzeit wasn't announced, we will, in Mitzvah Hashem, we will definitely get to it. So we have the Parsha of Nedarim, which is one very important lesson. And then, according to the Ramban, we have the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael, which one can give a whole shmooze about. As is well known, whether there's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael is generally a machlokas, said to be a machlokas between Rambam, who does not count it as a mitzvah, versus Ramban. And I'm kind of giving you a list of what I'm not going to talk about tonight. That's another thing one could spend a lot of time talking about. So, as is always, but particularly when you have a double parsha, there is truly an abundance of riches. There is no limit to what you can talk about in the Torah. But what I want to talk about tonight in particular is I want to talk about the 3 weeks and connect it to the Parsha as well. It will be connected to the Parsha. And really, I want to cover 5 observations about the 3 weeks. 3 of them are from Rav Tzadok of Lublin, and 2 of them is from the Ohev Yisrael, the Apter Rav, Rabbi Yeshua Heschel. So it kind of breaks down neatly into a 3 and a 2, although they're not of equal length as we go through it. First, let me share with you 3 observations of Rav Tzadok. The first observation is that the reason why we are misabel over the Beis HaMikdash for a period of 3 weeks is that, number one, these are weeks of tikkun. These are weeks of rectification. These are weeks in which we strive to make our heart and our soul a dwelling place for the Shekhinah. And that's how you rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. Our job in rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash at this point in time is not to clear the Temple Mount and physically build a structure. Some want to say that, but the Rambam is very clear, lahalacha, that the physical building of the Beis HaMikdash has to await the coming of Mashiach. But what we do is we build a spiritual dwelling place for God in our heart and in our soul. And when the Shekhinah can rest in our heart and in our soul, then we will be zocheh when we have a critical mass of Jews that are living that way, will then be zoche to the bayis shlishi, which according to Rashi at least will come down from the Shemayim. According to the Rambam, Mashiach will build it. But the physical Beis HaMikdash is not significant as a building. There are beautiful buildings in the world. The physical Beis HaMikdash is significant as a symbol of Hashras HaShechina. And therefore the 3 weeks are our endeavor to kind of rebuild the Beis HaMikdash so the 9th of Av will become a messianic day. Be'ezrat Hashem. So Rav Tzadok points out that if it's true that the 3 basic positive factors that keep the world going are Torah and Avoda, Torah, divine service, prayer and korbanos, and Gemilas Chasadim, and acts of loving kindness, we know that the 3 destructive factors in the world are Kina, jealousy, Taiva is excessive lust for sensual and material pleasure, and Kavod, seeking glory. And Rav Tzadok basically says that the 3 weeks, which remind us of the reasons for the Churban, are tikkunim for the 3 destructive midos of Kina, Taiva, v'Kavod. And Rav Tzadok goes further and he says that Kina, Taiva, v'Kavod are the ultimate roots of the 3 biggest averos that caused the destruction of the first temple: Avodah Zara, idolatry; Gilui Arayos, sexual immorality; and Shvichus Damim, murder. In this way, he says jealousy correlates to murder. Indeed, it happens to be the case. If you look at non-terror or war-related murders, it often arises out of jealousy, rivalry, and the like. So Kina, when taken to its extreme, culminates in Shvichus Damim. Taiva, taken to its extreme, culminates in Gilui Arayos. Now, the third one is a little subtle. He wants to say that Kavod leads to Avodah Zara. How is that so? Because Avodah Zara, which literally means what? Strange worship, foreign worship. It applies whenever your mindset is to elevate anything as more important than God in your life. So as a result, Avodah Zara can be self-idolatry. If I look at my comfort, my desires, my ego as more important than the Ratzon Hashem, I am actually guilty of Avodah Zara. Money can be Avodah Zara. Politics can be Avodah Zara. The attitude of Kochi v'yotzim yadi, it is my strength and the power of my hands that has given me all of my accomplishments, is a form of Avodah Zara. As the Torah says, V'ram levavecha, when you are arrogant and proud, V'shachachta es Hashem Elokecha, you will forget God. So Rav Tzadok's point is, the 3 weeks are a period in which we try to rectify the negative attributes of kina, jealousy, taiva, lust, and kavod, ego gratification, which in turn are the roots of the worst averis in the Torah, the averis that you have to give your life for, which is kina, which is avodah zara, gilui araya, shvichus dam. Again, some of these are going to be short. That's observation number 1. 3 weeks are keneged, kina, taiva, kavod. The second thought that Rav Tzadok says, these are in different places, so I'm gathering them from different discussions of this, is that Rav Tzadok connects the 3 weeks with the 4 expressions of redemption. You'll remember, when God took us out of Mitzrayim, God expressed to Moshe Rabbeinu the redemption in 4 terminologies. V'hotzeisi, I will take you out. V'hitzalti, I will save you. V'goalti, I will redeem you. V'lakachti, I will take you unto me for a nation. These are called the 4 terms of Geula. And it was on the basis of these 4 terms of Geula, 4 terms of redemption, that Chazal, our sages, enacted that at the Seder night we drink 4 cups of wine to correspond to the 4 Lashonot of Geula. If you want a discussion as to the significance of the 4 Lashonot of Geula, I refer you to earlier shiurim on Parshas Va'era. I'm not going to go over that now. But here is what Rav Tzadok wants to say. Rav Tzadok wants to say that if there are 4 stages of redemption, And they culminate in a fifth stage, because there is a fifth lashon, v'hevesi eschem el haaretz, that after you're redeemed, I will bring you to Eretz Yisrael. So there's 4 lashonos of geula, and a fifth lashon of coming to Eretz Yisrael. He wants to say that Shivas or B'Tammuz, the 3 weeks and Tisha B'Av, are a mirror image, or a negative image of the process of geula, moving backwards, kind of undoing it. So he says the following. He says, Shivas or B'Tammuz, last Tuesday, Shivas or B'Tammuz is keneged the first lashon of geula. You're kind of going backwards on that. Because Shivas or B'Tammuz actually should have been a very, very holy and elevated day, because that was the day where Moshe Rabbeinu came down with the first tablets after 40 days. And had there not been an Egel, that would have been the day where we actually got the Luchos. And that would have been the culmination of Yetzias Mitzrayim, where the whole purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim was to facilitate Matan Torah. And yet, because of the Chedo Egel, it turned into a day where the Torah was taken away from us instead of being given to us. So he says that Shivas or B'Tammuz is a reversal of stage 1. The 3 weeks, each of them correspond to the Lashon 2, 3, 4. And the 9th of Av, in which we were exiled from the land, is a reversal of a Hevesi, I will bring you to the land. So Rav Tzadok sees, so the way he's counting it is, Shivas or B'Tammuz, 3 weeks. That equals the 4 Lashonot of Geula. Tisha B'Av is keneged the 5th Lashon of Geula, and it represents the idea of negation or moving backwards away from the redemptive potentials that could have existed. And yet, there is a very subtle point, and that is, we perceive our journey in life as moving in a circle rather than linear. Now, when you move in a circle, the further away you get from a given point in the circle, the closer you are on the other side of it. Right? I have a point in the circle. I'm moving here. I'm further and further and further and further and further away. I'm closer and closer and closer, coming to the other side. So Rav Tzadok says, on one hand, the 3 weeks, Tisha B'Av, Shivas or B'Tammuz, on one hand, it's moving away from redemption. On the other hand, it's moving us closer to redemption. Because the key idea here is the awareness of distance generates a tremendous intensity of attachment and love. If it was Shakespeare that said absence makes the heart grow fonder. By the way, there's a whole theory, not too many people agree with it, but there's a theory that Shakespeare himself might have been an English Marano, an English hidden Jew. When Shakespeare was alive, whoever Shakespeare was, Jews were not allowed in England. They had been banished from England. But some want to point out that they analyze Shakespeare's plays and they find references to Pirkei Avos and various other things. Even his portrayal of Shylock, which people thought was anti-Semitic, actually is a heroic figure, whatever it would be. But the phrase, absence makes the heart grow fonder, is kind of a motif of this period. When we realize how far we are from Hashem, that creates a tremendous bond of intimacy and yearning. So it's not simply that Shivas or B'Tammuz, the 3 weeks, and the 9th of Av are reversals of the Lashonot of Geula, but they are actually part of the process of Geula that brings us closer to Hashem. It's a little reminiscent of a thought when Rav Hutner, towards the end of his life, came to Eretz Yisrael. He moved to Eretz Yisrael. Remember, he was actually a hostage on an airplane back in the 70s, but he did spend his last years here. So he was asked at one point, someone had the chutzpah to ask him, is there anything you miss about Chutz La'aretz? What do you miss about Chutz La'aretz, right? So a lot of things we might say, but what he said is this. The one thing he missed about Chutz La'aretz was the yearning to live in Eretz Yisrael. This is an interesting comment, so to speak. A person sits in Chutz La'aretz. He yearns, he dreams, when will I be able to come? And he thinks about it all the time. I want to be here. I want to be in Yerushalayim. So then you come. And then when you come, you face the normal frustrations of living here. Waiting for buses, going to banks, all of the stuff that is a lot of trouble. It's too hot, rainy sometimes, although all of those things are brachas, of course. And somehow, once you're here, the enthusiasm is not always going to be so powerful. It's quite an amazing thing that you dream and you yearn, and that can give you a stronger attachment to something than when it actually happens. They tell Rabbi Chanan that once a woman came to him crying. He was very angry at his Talmidim. And he asked her, what's wrong? He said, everybody has parents. They can visit their graves in the cemetery. And they can talk to their parents in the cemetery. They could daven. And they can ask their parents to be Melitz Yoshar in Shemayim. And all my friends have a grave that they can go to visit their parents and ask them to be Melitz Yoshar. He says, my parents are alive. Where can I go? This is what the person said. So the Talmidim started laughing. And Rabbi Chanan was very angry. He says, listen, the woman might be crazy, but if she has genuine pain, you have to deal with it. But the point once again is, you yearn for something, but when you have it, you don't appreciate it. That's what life is. I remember reading years and years ago, this was a fictional historical novel about Rabbi Akiva and his wife Rachel. It was written by Marcus Lehman, who was a Rav. He was a Chashuva person in the 19th century. He wrote about Rachel. And I just remember this little line, because it was like, I wanted to show that Rachel was more religious than her teenage friends, that they were thinking they had a free afternoon. So what should they do to spend the afternoon? So Rachel said, let's go over to the Beis HaMikdash. Imagine this. Let's go over to the Beis HaMikdash. We can watch the Korbanos. So the other girls said, nah, they always do the same thing there. Let's go to the mall instead. Now, again, I have no particular proof that this conversation ever happened. But it's kind of indicative of an interesting attitude. Yeah, the Beis HaMikdash, Carbon Tamid, it's the same thing every day. What is there to see? Maybe Yom Tovim, it's a little different, and the like. So therefore, the second point of Reb Tzadok, with some elaboration, is that on one hand, this is a reversal of the Geula, moving backwards. On the other hand, it's bringing you closer to where you need to be. Because absence creates tremendous yearning, tremendous connection with Hashem that perhaps you don't have when everything is fine. The third point of Rav Tzadok about the 3 weeks is that he focuses on the Haftorahs, just the first words of the Haftorahs. Last week was the first Haftorah of the 3 weeks, the Haftorah of Pinchas, and it's the beginning of the book of Yirmiyahu, who is the great Navi of the Churban. Yirmiyahu personally experienced the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. He, of course, is the author of Eicha, Lamentations. And it begins, Divrei Yirmiyahu, the words of Yirmiyahu. The Haftarah for this week is Parak Beis of Yirmiyahu, Shimu Devar Hashem, listen to the words of God, giving them Musar before the Churban. And the third Haftarah, which is the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av, is the first chapter of Yeshayahu, and it's called Chazayin Yeshayahu, vision of Yeshayahu. Of course, Yeshayahu lived many years before the Churban, but he has prophecies about things that are going to happen. So Rav Tzadok says, look at the first words, why we have 3 weeks. First, we start with speech. Then we move to hearing. And then we move to vision. So we talk about speak no evil, hear no evil, see no evil. The 3 weeks are designed to focus us on rectification of these faculties. Rectify your speech, not to say bad things about people or have negative thoughts, or at least negative speech. And then we say that even if you control your speech, also control what you're hearing. But ultimately, you got to change your perception. See, people make a big mistake when they think. I mean, Baruch Hashem, in recent years, the severity of Lashon Hara has kind of caught on. You know, we have these big gatherings all the time against Lashon Hara and the power of speech. You know, mainly by women more than men, but men attend them as well. And people are very conscious that Lashon Hara is a bad thing. Now, sometimes they go to an extreme. They're not willing to reveal information that they must reveal about Shidduchim and the like. So, as the Chafetz Chaim pointed out, who wrote the book on Lashon Hara, quite literally, he pointed out that sometimes there is a mitzvah, an obligation, to reveal derogatory information. You can't just be a tzaddik and be quiet. If somebody could be a danger to a shidduch or a danger to a woman or a man, etc., psychological, financial, whatever, a business partnership. Meaning you can't just play it safe and say, oh, I'm going to be machmir and never say anything about anybody. Sometimes you're mechuyev to say things. Sometimes you're not allowed to say things. And if you look at the Sefer Chafetz Chaim, more of the book is devoted to when you must reveal information than when you must not. But people make a mistake when they think that the central avodah of Lashon Hara is to control my speech. Because here's the problem. If I'm filled with negativities, resentment, and anger, but all I do is bite my lip and not say anything, now, of course, that's a high madrega. In spite of the thoughts that are roiling through my consciousness. Well, number one, I'm going to have a very bloody lip. My lip is going to be bleeding. And number two, like a pressure cooker, eventually I'm going to explode. You can't go around in your mind with negativities and then just control your speech. So the real ultimate goal of Zehirus and Lashon Hara is not to change your speech patterns, but to change your perception patterns. You learn to look at people in a different way. You learn to understand the trials they're going through, the difficulties they face. You look at them with compassion and with love and with empathy. And at that point, you're no longer struggling with controlling your speech. You just don't want to say anything negative about them. You lose the desire. Like, what's the purpose? What am I trying to do here? What does it accomplish? Why? Why do I want to put people down? You see? So that's really the progression. Control your speech, control your inputs, but ultimately control your vision, control your perception of reality, redirect. So these are three kind of unrelated observations of Reb Sada. One is the connection to Kina, Taiva, and Kavod. The other is the connection to the four Lashonot of Geula, in which on one level you're reversing that process. On the other level you're coming closer to it on the other side through absence and create yearning. It makes the heart grow fonder. And the third is, it is a tikkun, a rectification for the koach of speech. And I had mentioned in the beginning that Nedarim in particular is an outstanding example of the power of speech. Words are reality. You know, the old thing that mothers would tell their kids when I was growing up. I don't know if they still use the saying in America. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, is unfortunately, sadly, just not true. If anything, the names can hurt a person much more than the sticks and the stones. The sticks and the stones can break bones, to be sure, but Baruch Hashem, kids usually can recover from that. And they get better. The psychic hurt of being humiliated can last with a person their entire life. So you got to be misakeh your speech, and then what you listen to, and ultimately your perception. Just as an aside about the power of speech, I remember hearing an interview once with Richard Nixon. And Richard Nixon certainly went through the ringer in terms of Watergate, in terms of resigning the presidency. He went through quite a lot. Again, whether deserved or not deserved is another question. The truth is, from a Jewish perspective, Nixon was actually a very, very good president, and he actually was a good president. It's a funny thing. If it wouldn't have been for the lying and the cheating and the Watergate, he actually was quite an excellent president. I mean, much, when you listen to him compared to almost anyone that came afterwards, you see the difference, lahavdil, between a godol and, stam politician. But anyway, when he was being interviewed, he kept on talking about the playground taunts that he got as a 4th grader or a 5th grader. Now here's a guy, president of the United States, who kind of the most powerful human office in the world. And what happened to him in 4th grade somehow is affecting the decisions that he's making now. That's a little scary. But that's the power of speech. It lasts forever and ever and ever. Okay. So those are the 3 horas I wanted to share from Rav Tzadok. Now I want to share 2 beautiful, more lengthy horas from the Ohev Yisrael, the Abder Rav. And it's interesting that I've been quoting him a few times past few weeks. It's interesting that it comes up a lot, so I don't know. Maybe with respect to the 3 weeks, it's an unusually rich load of associations that he brings in. But an amazing thing. Ha'ara number 1 is in Parshat Pinchas. So I'm going to go backwards a little bit and connect the 3 weeks to Pinchas. Ha'ara number 2 will be connecting the 3 weeks to this Parsha. Ha'ara number 1, he points out that Pinchas is always read either right before Shivas or Tamuz or right afterwards. It's always like the very early in the 3 weeks. He says, what's the connection? Because the Jewish calendar is not accidental, and anything that's read in a given time of year is connected to the time of year. So this is the cheshbon that he makes. Parshas Pinchas has a very lengthy list of all of the special musaf, additional offerings that are brought on special days. That includes Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, the Shalosh Regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. I'm sorry, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Shalosh Regalim are Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. In fact, the musafim, all the musafim are in Parshas Pinchas. So he wants to say the following. If you count the number of sacred days that we have in the calendar, you come up with 21. Now his count is a little unusual. Let me give you his count. Shabbos, even though there are 52 Shabbos a year, but there's one Kedusha called Shabbos, so Shabbos counts as 1. Similarly, Rosh Chodesh, even though there are 12 Rosh Chodeshes, but there's one Kedusha called Rosh Chodesh counts as 2. Okay, so Shabbos is 1. Shabbos is 1, Rosh Chodesh is 1, that gives you 2. We then come to Pesach, and since there are 7 distinct days of Pesach, we count Pesach as 7. So that gives you 9. We then come to Shavuos, which is 1 day in Eretz Yisrael. That gives you 10. We then come to Rosh Hashanah, which is 2 days even in Eretz Yisrael. So that gives you 12. We then come to Yom Kippur, which is 1 day. That gives you 13. We then come to Sukkos and Shmini Atzeres together. That gives you 8. So 13 and 8 is 21. So based on his count, there are 21 sacred days of the year that require, musaf and the like. He points out the 3 weeks are 21 days. 21 days. He correlates the 21 days of Bein HaMetzarim, the 3 weeks, with the 21 sacred days of Chagim. And this is what he says. He says the 21 days of Bein HaMetzarim, the 3 weeks, Bein HaMetzarim means between the narrow places. Shavuos, Tamuz, and Tisha B'Av have a Kedusha that is so awesomely great that all of the holidays, including Shabbos, get their Kedusha. It's like a spillover. The Kedusha is so massive that it spills over into sacred time of the 21 days. Meaning the 21 Chagim that we have are simply a reflection or a spillover or the leftovers of the Kedusha of the 3 weeks. But the Kedusha of the 3 weeks is so awesomely great that the light has to be covered up by extreme darkness. because the light is too powerful for us to absorb. And only Limota Mashiach, where Chazal indeed teach us that those 21 days, including the night of Av, will be days of sason and simcha, that their light will be revealed, and they will even overshadow the 21 holy days of the Musafim. That's quite an amazing thing. And he makes the point that the letter Tes, which of course is very significant, because Tes is the 9th of Av. Now Tes, on one hand, well, number one, the 17th of Tammuz, 17. The word Tov, generally, the gematria of Tov, is 17. Is that right? 9, 6, yeah, Tov. Right? So it's very interesting that Bein HaMetzarim begins with the word Tov, 17, and it ends with the 9th of Av, which is Tes, which is also Tov. So Bein HaMetzarim itself is bracketed with the notion of Tov. And he says Tov itself connotes a goodness that is hidden and inaccessible, because he brings from the Sefer Yetzirah that if you look at a Tes in Sefer Torah writing, in print, so you'll notice that the head of the Tes is bent downwards, inwards. So which means the goodness is concealed within a framework. And therefore the Apter Rav says that by connecting Parshat Pinchas to the 3 weeks, that highlights to me that the holiness of all the Yomim Tovim comes from a greater holiness, a higher source that is shrouded in darkness and distance. And that is the Kedusha of Bein HaMetzarim. And therefore he says, these days are potentially, and again this connects to Rav Tzadok's idea, days of tremendous closeness to God. In fact, in Eicha, I don't know if he brings it, but other Svarim bring it, it says, Kol Rotfeha, this is the beginning of Eicha, Kol Rotfeha, it's talking about all who pursued Jerusalem, all who tried to destroy Jerusalem. Hisiguha, captured it or reached it. Bein HaMetzarim, between the narrow confines. So, right, the narrow straits, no place to escape. Min HaMeitzar Karasika, I called out to God from the narrow straits. So the simple meaning is, Yirmiyahu HaNavi is simply describing that we tried to run away and there was no place to escape and the enemy got us, right? That's the simple meaning of the pasuk. But B'derech Drush, they say the following. The word Rotfeha could actually be broken up into 2 words. Rotfei Ka. All who are pursuing God. Hisigua will reach him Bein HaMetzarim, in the period Bein HaMetzarim, which is the name for the 3 weeks. Right? Kol Rotfei Ka Hisigua Bein HaMetzarim. Right? Tremendous closeness, ad kedei kach, that it is the shirish, the root of all of the holiness, all of the holy days that are expressed in Parshat Pinchas. It's a remarkable idea, correlating the 21 holy days of Musaf with the 21 days of Bein HaMetzarim, between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. But now we come to a 5th thought, which is the second thought of the Ohev Yisrael. This too is an extraordinarily beautiful thought. Again, it's not connected necessarily to the first thought. And this takes us to Parshas Maasei. That's the second of the 2 Parshios. And the Torah gives us a list of all of the stops, all of the journeys that the Jewish people took till they came to Eretz Yisrael. By the way, Rashi points out an important point. You know, you read Parshas Maasei and you get the impression they were moving every day. The truth is, they were not. There were actually stops in which they remained more than 19 years. I mean, there are places in which they literally lived for a very, very long time. The total number of travels in the 40-year period is 42. There are 42 stops from Mitzrayim till Arvot Moab, which is right before they enter Eretz Yisrael. 42 Masaot. And the Mekubalim make a very big deal about the 42 stops in the journey to Eretz Yisrael. And they say it's very, very deeply symbolic of the journey of the neshama through the desert of Olam Hazeh. Olam Hazeh is like a desert, meaning maybe materially there's a lot of comfort here, but it's a desert in which we don't see God, we don't feel Ruchnius. There are so many temptations. There are snakes and scorpions of the spiritual kind that take us away from Hashem. We got to navigate this desert. And the 42 is a reference to the ability, and I'll explain why in a moment, to kind of get through that desert till you get to the promised land. The promised land is Olam Haba. So the Sifrei Kabbalah see the 42 journeys as a metaphor or a mashal for the struggle of the neshama to survive this world, survive the desert of this world, till we get to Olam Haba. Now in that connection, the Apter Rav makes a beautiful observation. After going through the 42 places, the Torah gives different mitzvahs, and one of the mitzvahs that it gives us is Ir Miklat, city of refuge. The city of refuge, someone kills inadvertently, but negligently. If you kill somebody through an unavoidable accident, the building just collapsed, and you landed on somebody, you don't go to the Ir Miklat because you were not guilty of anything. Really, the Ir Miklat, which is only for a shogeg, unintentional and not a mazid, that's true, but it has to be, it's very akin to the legal category that we call manslaughter. Okay, so essentially manslaughter. You know, you didn't look both ways when you went to a stop sign. You threw a rock out of your apartment without looking, meaning you didn't intend to kill anybody, but you were careless. You were negligent. So the Torah says you go to a designated city of refuge. And it's a very strange sentence. You remain in the city of refuge until the Kohen Gadol dies. Very, very strange sentence. If the Kohen Gadol dies one day after you went to the Ir Miklat, you're free. If the Kohen Gadol lives another 50 years, you're stuck. And if you die before the Kohen Gadol dies, you are buried in the Ir Miklat. And you're not exhumed to a family plot till the Kohen Gadol dies. This is a very indeterminate sentence. Very, very strange. The Gemara has a very fascinating machlokes like this. What if somebody's a Kohen Gadol, but we then discover that his mother was actually a divorcee, which means he's not a Kohen at all? Do I treat that as a Kohen Gadol who died and the Rotzeach goes free? Or do I say that since retroactively there never was a Kohen Gadol, the halacha is if there was no Kohen Gadol when he's sentenced, he's there forever. So do I look at it like there was a Kohen Gadol until today and now there isn't, in which case he goes free? Or do I say, which is actually logical, well, we see there was no Kohen Gadol to begin with, so he's stuck forever. All right, that's a machlokes in the Gemara, Batla Kahuna or Mesa Kahuna. Very, very fascinating machlokes about whether disqualifications of Kahuna are retroactive or they're only considered to be prospective. In fact, there will also be a shaila, all the korbanos that he brought, were they kosher until his disqualification was known? But be it as it may, the Gemara asks the question, why should the Rotzeach, why should his sentence be connected to the Kohen Gadol's death? And the Babylonian Talmud says, because the Kohen Gadol is responsible, because it was his job to pray for his generation that these accidents shouldn't occur. And therefore, if it occurred on his watch, it's because he did not pray enough for the Jewish people. And therefore he is responsible, and that's why his death is considered to be an atonement for all of the people that are in the Ir Miklat. Now, interestingly enough, the Mishnah recounts that the mothers of Kohanim Gedolim used to bring gifts and food packages to the Rotzchim so that the Rotzchim should not pray that the Kohen Gadol should die. Kind of bribe them. Now, I'm not sure. Perhaps the Mishnah is being a little bit euphemistic. I mean, I would have thought maybe because I'm living in 21st century society, that the real problem that the women are afraid of is not so much the Kohanim Gadol are going to, the Rotzim are going to pray, but they're going to hire, mafia to kill the Kohen Gadol. But maybe I'm being cynical and I'm using modern values. The Mishnah does not say that they're afraid of hitmen or assassins. The Mishnah says they're afraid of the power of prayer. That's what the Mishnah says, and therefore they would bribe them with cookies or whatever. The Bali Musar asked the question, well, wait a second here. If I want to get out of the Yer Miklat and I'm going to pray to God, am I going to be bribed by chocolate chip cookies? I mean, is that going to change my orientation? So the Bali Musar answer, of course it's not going to change your orientation. You're still going to daven. But you're not going to daven with the same 100% devotion. Because you'll be thinking about, dear old mom, brought me these cookies. And therefore your kavanah is not going to be 100%. And that's going to make the difference already. Meaning you're going to pray, the guy should die. But it's not going to be with the same geschmack or the same hislavos. And once the kavanah is thrown off a little bit, the koach of the tefillah may be very, very different as well. Now, how many Yer Miklats are there? So the truth of the matter is there are actually 48. There are 6 primary Yer Miklats, and there are 42 subsidiary. All 48 are the cities of Levium. By the way, Lubavitcher Rebbe made a very, very excellent point. He said, an Yer Miklat is the closest thing we have to a prison system in the Torah. The Torah gives punishments, lashes, money, even death penalty. But the Torah does not have imprisonment. The Torah does not have a jail system. The closest thing we have to a jail system is the Yer Miklat, where you're confined to a city the rest of your life, or at least until the Kohen Gadol dies. Now, an Yer Miklat is a regular city. It's not a prison. In fact, the Yer Miklat has a regular population. The regular population are Levium. So the Rebbe pointed out, very sensible, that when you send teenage kids, let's say an 18-year-old, you send them to prison, what environment are you putting him in? You're putting him in an environment of criminals, lowlifes, rapists, murderers. What type of chinuch is he going to get in prison? He starts off as moderately off the derech. He'll become a lot worse. That's why what is called the recidivism rate is extremely high. Once you're in prison once, you'll be going back again and again and again. The Rebbe says that's self-destructive. The Torah's model of imprisonment is somebody went off the derech. They were careless. They were callous. They were a little indifferent to life. So who do you put them with? You put them with tzaddikim. You put them with Talmidei Chachamim. You put them with Kohanim. You put them with Leviim. And that raises a person. And that makes a person more sensitive to Ruchnius and the Tselem Elokim, the divine image in human beings. So the Rebbe said, if anything, the model of prison. Now we're not talking about dangerous, vicious people. I mean, that's a separate thing. But the Yer Miklat is not designed for dangerous, vicious people. That's a separate category. But we're talking about people who were careless, people who weren't thinking, people who were not as conscientious as they should have been. They didn't care enough. We're not talking about dangerous people. And for those type of people, the Rebbe said, whatever prison system you have should be based on putting the person in a good environment, putting the person in a religious environment, a moral environment, where he can learn to change and learn to become better. So the Yer Miklat teaches us a lot about an appropriate philosophy of incarceration and the like. Okay. Now, when I say 6 of the cities are primary Orei Miklat, and 42 of the cities are secondary Orei Miklat, what do I mean? What is a primary Yer Miklat? And what is a secondary Yer Miklat? So the Gemara explains in Maseches Matos that the 6 primary cities, Hebron, for example, is one of them. That's the most famous one that you would know. They protect the murderer from the Goel Hadam, from the blood avenger, who could kill him, even if the Rotzeach doesn't even know that he's in an Yer Miklat. Let's assume the Rotzeach is running away and he enters the boundary of Hebron, and he doesn't even know that it's Hebron. he is still protected. They give him protection even without thought and thinking. The 42 cities only protect you if there's conscious awareness. Now, I'm not sure how you prove any of this, but somehow, if the Goel Adam managed to kill the guy before the guy knew he was in one of those 42 cities, the Goel Adam would be exempt from punishment, because these 42 cities protect you only midas. By the way, I'll tell you a famous word. It's not a famous word, but I thought from my own Rosh Hashiva, Rav Ruderman, in which he comforted Rav Aaron Kotler, I believe Rav Aaron Kotler, when Rav Aaron Kotler was trying to collect money for Lakewood or whatever it would be. Again, I'm not sure, I think it was Rav Aaron Kotler, but I might be wrong. He got very little money for his yeshiva, great yeshiva, Lakewood. And that same week in Baltimore, there was a conservative or reform group that was raising money, and they got like $1 million in like a night or something. And Rav Aaron was zerbrochen. Rav Aaron was brokenhearted because he was wondering, why do such important causes of Torah don't achieve any success, and then you have all sorts of causes that are against Torah that seem to be very successful. They attract all of it. So Rav Ruderman came up with this thought. My Rosh Hashiva Rav Ruderman said the following. You know, it's brought down that the Arei Miklat had road signs, meaning to say, each Ir Miklat had signs on the road telling you, Ir Miklat this way. So the Rotzeach would know where to go. And yet we find that when you're going to the Beis HaMikdash, when you're Olei Regel, there were no road signs that directed you to the Beis HaMikdash. You know, you're walking on the road, and you'd have to ask people. Which means, when it comes to going to the Beis HaMikdash, you have to ask. When it comes to the Ir Miklat, you don't ask. Why is that so? Why wouldn't there be signage for the Beis HaMikdash? I mean, today there would be, but in the olden days there was not. So he said the following. When a person's going to the Beis HaMikdash, that's a Kiddush Hashem. That's a sanctification of God's name. That's a mitzvah. We want you to ask directions because we want this to spread. We want more and more people to know, oh, you're going to the Beis HaMikdash, I'm going to the Beis HaMikdash, he's going to the Beis HaMikdash. We don't want a sign. We want you to say, direct me to Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh, the Beis HaMikdash. When it comes to Kiddush Hashem, you want to spread the news across as wide a group as possible. When a person murdered, even inadvertently, but because of carelessness, there's a desecration of God's name. It's a tragedy. We don't want people to kind of publicize, oh, I killed somebody, where's the Ir Miklat? So we give him the sign so he'll figure it out on his own. So the Rosh Hashiva said to Rav Aaron Kotler, he says, when you have a good cause, God makes it hard for you to raise money, so you have to go to a lot of people, and you spread the beauty of what you're doing. When it's a bad cause, God will give him all the money up front. That way, you know, you're not going to spread the news and talk about it for months and months and months. You'll get it done in one night, and then you get rid of it. Right? So that's the idea of the Ir Miklat. So once again, therefore, 6 Arei Miklats give protection even without knowledge. 42 only with knowledge. So, here is what the Abder Rav says. The 42 journeys of the Jewish people through the desert until we get to the Promised Land, which is a metaphor for the journey of the Neshama through the desert of this world, with all of its trials and all its tribulations, correspond to the 42 cities of refuge. Meaning, God gives us, as we journey through the desert of life, God gives us cities of refuge where we can refresh our neshama, build up our kesher with Hashem, Torah, mitzvos, chesed, avas Yisrael. The 42 journeys are the 42 Arei Miklat. But here's the thing. The same way the 42 Arei Miklat only protect you when you have conscious awareness, so too, Your Torah and your mitzvos protect you, and they provide the ir miklat for your soul only when you consciously think about what you're doing. If you do your mitzvahs automatic pilot, you do your mitzvahs by rote, you do your mitzvahs superficially, they're not going to elevate you. They're not going to lift you up. They're not going to protect you from the ravages of society. And therefore, the Apter Rav says, the 42 Masaot corresponds to the 42 Arei Miklat, which are the cities or the aspects of refuge that protect us, that give us strength, that give us courage, that give us devekos, attachment to the Almighty, as we go through the desert. Because, and the emes is, all of us are rotzchem, all of us are kind of murderers. Because think about it. You know, Hashem gave us a life. And if we squander that life and we don't use it properly, what are we doing but killing ourselves? A person wastes time. A person wastes life. It's ritzicha. And therefore, we kind of need the ir miklat, the 42 arei miklat, the 42 masaot, the 42 journeys. Now, the Apter Rav also points out that in Kriyas Shema, the first parsha of Shema, after Shema Yisrael, starting from the Ahavta, I'll talk about the first pasuk in a moment, has 42 words. And the first parsha of Shema is about accepting the yoke of heaven, and that will give you the 42 arei miklat, which will protect you as you journey through the desert of life. Okay, so you see, all of the associations, they're a bit complicated. It's kind of like a tapestry. The 42 stops are the 42 cities of refuge, because we are murderers. We are self-murderers of ourselves. And that in turn connects to the 42 words in Shema, not counting the first pasuk, which I'll get to in a moment. And that is connected to also the ir miklat of Kabbalah's O Malchus Shemayim. Just another little thought from Rav Aaron Kotler. I'll come back to the first pasuk of Shema in a moment. Rav Aaron Kotler was once asked by a Talmud in a different context, that why would such a great Gadol and a great Rosh Hashiva like Rav Aaron have to spend all of his time collecting nickels and dimes, but not only collecting nickels and dimes, but being humiliated, being insulted, being degraded. Here is what Rav Aaron said. We know if you kill b'shogeg, you go into exile. Ir miklat is called exile. He says, every teacher of Torah might be a murderer. I didn't murder by sticking a knife in somebody. But again, the power of speech, my words, my negativities. I could have said something that hurt a person, that humiliated a person, that took away their enthusiasm, that embarrassed them. That's murder. It's unintentional murder or homicide, because I didn't intend to do it, but I have to go to the ir miklat. And that's why he says, teachers of Torah, and the Rosh Hashiva represents not only himself, but in a sense, he's a shaliach for all of his faculty. Rosh Hashivas have to go into Gullus. They have to go into exile, because they too are rotseach b'shogeg. Quite amazing. So that connects ir miklat with the power of speech. Okay. So, what are our associations? The 42 stops are a metaphor for the journey of the soul in the desert of Olam Hazeh until it reaches Olam Haba, ultimate redemption. They correspond to the 42 arei miklat that give you protection. Your Torah, your mitzvahs, your avodah, your avas Yisrael, which protects you from the murderous forces that want to destroy you spiritually. And that corresponds to the 42 words of Shema from the Ahavta until the end. He then makes a final point in the equation. This is a little of a Hasidic drush, that the 21 days of Bein HaMetzarim can be subdivided into 42 nights and days, right? In other words, if you take every day and you divide it, Laila v'yom, you get 42. And therefore, Bein HaMetzarim itself corresponds to the 42 stages of journey. 21 days, 21 nights that bring us to redemption. Now again, this ties in with Rav Tzadok, because the obvious question you're going to ask is, well, wait a second here. The journey of the 42 stops is from the Midbar to Eretz Yisrael, from Olam Hazeh to Olam Haba. This is a journey from the 17th of Tamuz to the 9th of Av, which is destruction. I'm moving in the opposite direction. But once again, I think the Abdur Rav would have to tie this in with the idea that the distance creates closeness. And therefore, this is the great, great journey. The 3 weeks is the great, great journey of giving us the Ir Miklat that will bring us to Geula. Okay, so 42 stops, 42 Arei Miklat, 42 words in Shema from the Ahavta. I'll get to the first pasuk in a moment. And the 42 halves of Bein HaMetzarim are all going to be connected. Now the Abdur Rav then goes on and says, okay, but what do we do about the other 6 primary Arei Miklat that are not reflected in the Masa'ot? Now keep in mind that he says the following. The 42 words of Shema from the Ahavta are the Arei Miklat, the second level Arei Miklat. But Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad is 6 words. That corresponds to the first level of the Ir Miklat. So what's the connection there? So he says the following. The 42 Arei Miklat only work if you have conscious awareness. You got to know you're in that city. So that refers to the notion of working on myself with conscious striving to make myself a better person. But the first 6 verses of Shema, which refer to the 6 Arei Miklat that protect you even without awareness, says the Abdur Rav, they refer to what's called the Pintalayit, that within every Jew, no matter how ignorant, no matter how rejecting a Jew is of Torah, there is in his heart of hearts a receptivity to Ruchnius, in which that is salvageable, even when he's not consciously aware of it. That's the first pasuk of Shema, and those are the 6 Arei Miklat, which are not picked up in the 42 journeys, which is the journey of conscious awareness, the journey of mindfulness. And this is what the Baal HaTanya says. The Baal HaTanya writes that no Jew has to learn how to love God or how to revere God. It is built into us. It is a quality of our neshamas. It's already here. It gets covered up. It gets obscured. Lack of awareness, lack of connection. But at moments, the Baal HaTanya says, there will be moments of stress in which that Avas Hashem and that Yiras Hashem is going to break out. And that is why even people who are very, very far from Torah, there will be occasions in which they will give their lives al Kiddush Hashem. Many, many, many stories of this. Just one illustration. There was a man in a shtetl during the Holocaust who was mamash machal Shabbos. He had a store open on Shabbos. He didn't care about anything. And at one point, when the Nazis were massacring the town, they ordered him to trample on a Sefer Torah. No, they took a Torah, they threw it on the ground, they said, jump on it. Now here was a man who didn't care about anything, one would have thought. And he said, no, I'm not going to jump on the Torah. They pulled out the gun and said, we will kill you right now. If you, I mean, probably they would kill him anyway, but we'll kill you right now if you don't jump on the Torah. He said, I don't care. He died. He gave his life. Al Kiddush Hashem. The Avas Hashem and the Yiras Hashem came out of nowhere, because it's already there. You remember Daniel Pearl a few years ago was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. He was not an observant Jew. In fact, I believe he was married to a non-Jewish woman. He was kidnapped. Was it Al Qaeda? It was not Hamas. It was before Hamas, but Al Qaeda or ISIS. I think maybe Al Qaeda. I don't remember. And they videoed this. This was on YouTube, although they took it down. They put a knife or something to his throat, and they said, say that Muhammad is the prophet or whatever it would be. He said, I am a Jew. They beheaded him right there. Chazal say, Yesh kona olam b'sha'achas. A person could get his whole eternity in Olam Haba in 1 second. Look at this. Where did this come from? I am a Jew. He died right then. You know, they tell a story. I mean, it's a very sad. It's a sad context, but it's a humorous story a little bit. Rav Aaron Kotler went during World War II. He went on Shabbos to have a meeting with Henry Morgenthau, who was the Secretary of the Treasury in Franklin Roosevelt's administration. Morgenthau was a German Jew from a very, very wealthy, assimilated family. He was totally not involved in any type of Jewish thing. But Rav Aaron Kotler, with his interpreter, Irving Bunim, who was his great interpreter, a very successful businessman, a very chashuv, very learned Jew, and a confidant of Gedolim, was going to be his translator. And Rav Aaron Kotler was trying to negotiate for the government to allow money to be paid, to be sent to occupied Europe, both to help Jews and even to bribe Nazis to get Jews out. And Morgenthau basically said, you know, can't do that, it's against the law, we are at war with Germany and the Axis powers, and under federal law you're not allowed to send money to enemy countries or whatever. So Rav Aaron said, it seems to me that you're more concerned about keeping your job than about the lives of the Jewish people. Now, he said it in Yiddish. Bunim did not want to translate that. Bunim didn't want to offend Morgenthau. So Bunim just said, you know, you see the rabbi's very upset and he really wants you to think about this. So Rav Aaron, even though he didn't know English, somehow intuited that Bunim did not say what Rav Aaron said. So he shakes Bunim's jacket and says, say exactly what I said, word for word. Don't soften it. So Bunim was very, very embarrassed, but he said, well, the rabbi feels you care more about your job than the deaths of the Jewish people. The rabbi said, you don't care. So Morgenthau took off his glasses and he put his head in his hands for 2 minutes. And then he lifted up his head and he said, tell the rabbi, not only would I give up my job for my people, I would give up my life for my people. It was already, unfortunately, relatively late in the war, but Morgenthau, in fact, did help with the War Refugee Board, and you know, a few thousand Jews were saved because of Morgenthau's intervention. Now, where did that come from? His initial reaction was, I got to follow the law, and you know, that's what the laws are the law. I can't make exceptions in time of war. And yet, as the Baal HaTanya says, there is something within the Yid that comes out, and that's Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That's the 6 Arei Miklat that protect you even when you have no conscious awareness, right? That's the separate thing. But the Masaot in Parshas Maasei are the 42. So, again, it's a bit of a complicated tapestry, but it's a very, very powerful one in which we connect the 42 journeys with the 42 Arei Miklat, with the 42 words of V'ahavta in the first Parsha of Shema, with the 42 halves of the day and night of the Bein HaMetzarim. The upshot is that these are days of great holiness. Again, the Alter Rebbe is making the point in another way, of great, great holiness and a potential of great closeness to Hashem. So may we spend these times in trying to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash of our heart. And if enough of us build the Beis HaMikdash in our heart and our soul, we will be Zocheh to Mashiach and the Binyan Beis HaMikdash. May it be B'mheira v'yameinu. Amen.
Yibaneh, 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 Yibaneh,